Get your Bibles. John chapter 10. It's an honor for me to be with you. It really is. When Phil and I agreed that this was something that I could add to my calendar, it was just really exciting. My wife and I have battled back and forth now for several weeks, months, as to whether she'd be able to come along, and we ended up finally a couple days ago that she just could not. I'm still working to get her here next weekend. Everything's better with Brenda around. John 10. Jesus is busy talking, and somebody's taking notes. I've thought about that so many times. When Jesus is quoted, who was taking notes? I mean, somebody just clicked on voice on their iPhone and picked it all up and transcribed it later when they got home? Were there people who were brilliant enough that they could take down shorthand and get absolutely every word? And when I look at my Bible, mine is one of those that has Christ's words in red. And when you get to John 10, it's almost all red. And I think, wow. I tell you the truth. John 10, verse 1. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate of the shepherd, who enters by the gate, is the shepherd of the sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him. Can you hear it creak? And the sheep listen to his voice. I have a very good friend who is a sheep herder and a rancher in Invercargill, New Zealand. Now that's as far down you can get in New Zealand without being in Antarctica. And for those of you who remember the movie and other parts of this, of the gentleman who raced the world's fastest Indian lives in Invercargill. And that's where he built his Indian motorcycle before it came to the Bonneville Salt Flats, and raced faster than any other motorcycle it ever raced, and still holds some records. Well, whenever I go down to visit him, the first thing we do is go to the hardware store, because the original Indian motorcycle is in the middle of the hardware store. And you can't go to Invercargill without touching the Indian, right? And so we worship at the Indian, and then we go out to his sheep. And it's just really funny, because when you get out to the sheep, my buddy says, I hate sheep. And I said, well, why do you have all these sheep? You've got almost 2,000 sheep. And he said, oh, my wife loves them. So I got her a couple, and there's always more. And it's this constant interaction. She loves sheep. He hates sheep. When he is in the sheep pen, the sheep back away. When she is in the sheep pen, she whispers to them, and they all come toward her. When the shepherd enters by the gate, which the watchman opens, the sheep listen to his voice. Her voice. She calls her own sheep by name and leads them out. And when she has brought them out, she goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow because they know her voice. You know anything about sheep? My wife was raised on a sheep farm in Minnesota, but I've got to go back to Invercargill. I don't know anything about sheep. And so I'm visiting, and my job that day was to take pictures of a herd, flock, group sheep. Lots of sheeps. And so what do? I go to the front of the herd where they're getting ready to come back in towards the barn. And I set up my camera and start taking pictures, and none of the sheep will come. And the shepherd calls to me, what are you, stupid? They're very good friends. Very candid friends. What are you, stupid, Duerksen? And I said, probably, what am I doing wrong? She says, you're in front of the sheep. They don't know you. They will never come to you unless they know you. They don't know you, and I can't tell them you're cool. Get behind them. I said, well, I don't want sheep bums. She said, I'll fix that. And so she gets in front of the sheep, and she marches them around. I get great pictures of sheep. because they are following the shepherd, but not me. They don't know me. They're terrified of me. They will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. Now, Jesus used this figure of speech, but they didn't understand what he was telling them. How many times has a pastor stood up and preached this marvelous sermon and given you a wonderful illustration, and you had no idea what he was talking about? It's normal. It's biblical. Jesus did that, and nobody understood. Verse 6, Jesus used this figure of speech. They didn't understand what he was telling them. So Jesus said again, I love the times in Scripture where the writer records Jesus' explanation of the hard saying he has just given. He just gave something that was beyond their ability to understand. And everybody says, excuse me? And he looks at their faces and they're going, huh? And Marge leans over to Fred and says, what was that he said about sheep? And Jesus said again, this is the verse I want you to know. I tell you the truth. I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers. The sheep did not listen to them. But I am the gate. And whoever enters through the gate, through me, will be saved. He will come in, he will go out, he will find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Everything Jesus does is designed to give us the best. You believe that? Then why aren't we all rich? Then why do we bother worrying about hospitals, healthcare facilities? And why are some of us visiting family in Alzheimer's units? What's wrong? Everything Jesus does for us is designed to give us the best. But the thief is still around. And the thief comes in to steal, kill, and destroy, to steal our hope, to kill our happiness, and to destroy everything good God is trying to give us in our lives. I often hear the question, why? 9 years at Florida Hospital, for instance. How many times did I hear the question, why? Why did this happen? What is going on? This is awful. Why? The thief is alive and well. And the thief's job in life is to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come, Jesus said, that you might have life and have it to the full. So I want to help you with that verse in just a different way. If the thief is coming to steal, kill, and destroy, and never forget those three things. He's going to steal your hope. He's going to kill your happiness. He is going to destroy everything good that God is trying to give you. If you let him in. If you let him in. It's 1,000 times worse. But God, who is the gate, who is the shepherd, everything about him is designed to give you the very, very best. So one day I was in Hawaii with my wife. We love going to Hawaii. Don't get there nearly enough. I'd love to live there. But instead I live here, and one day I was over there, and Brenda and I were together, and we were on the island where you can go to Kilauea. And there in Kilauea, it's that huge hole in the ground that was a volcano that exploded and built most of the island. It's still blowing today. You can still get pictures of brilliant red lava flowing into the ocean there on the Big Island. So we're visiting Kilauea. Believe it or not, it's a national park. And if you go to Kilauea, you can walk down inside the crater. you can look in to where it's blowing, and you can see the lava moving around. And so Brenda and I signed up, and we went along with Karen, who was a ranger, an official, genuine ranger for the United States government, who understands how to keep tourists from falling into the volcano. And the first thing she said, she got us all in a little crowd, and she says, all right, there's one thing you need to know. Kilauea is the home of the goddess Pele. Goddess Pele is responsible for fire, for volcanoes. Because of her, we have these islands. The goddess Pele is incredibly jealous and will not allow you to take anything away from this place. You will find beautiful pieces, and she just went on and on, waxing eloquent about what we were going to see. And she said, if you take it, the goddess Pele will punish you. Now let's go. And I thought, well, now that's a cool picture of God. This is the God who gives you your island, who gives you the fire, who makes sure that you have black sand beaches, who does all of this cool stuff. But if you mess around with her, she will whack you. I said, man, I'm glad I don't believe that about God. We go down, we start walking through. Now, there's a guy in the tour group, just a man, and he fell in love with a piece of lava that had blown out at some point and had cooled in such a way that it's got these wonderful angelic strings. And it looks like hair. It looks like a woman's hair that has been combed beautifully and just a little bit braided at the, it's just gorgeous. He reaches down, finds that it's solid, and I watch as he slips it into the pocket of his jacket. And so when we got up a little farther where you could look over and see Goddess's eyes practically, it doesn't feel like a very safe place. Everywhere you walk, there are little posts on both sides, and it says, if you get off here, you may fall in. So this is one where you follow the path. You don't even question. When the ranger says, don't go over there, you don't go over there. You might never come home. So I kind of go over to the ranger lady, and I say, is this goddess Pele stuff really true? When, if I pick up a piece of lava and put it in my pocket and take it with me, what happens? I mean, that can't really be true. And she says, she will destroy you. I have letters in my office from people all over the world who took some lava, some black sand, home with them. And the horrible things that have happened to them. It's really true. So we walked on a little bit, and I watched as the guy reached into his pocket and pulled it out and very carefully set it down. And I thought again, isn't it wonderful that I don't believe in a God like that? Who that if I cross him in any way, if I steal something that he said not to steal, if I do something that in any way is against God, he's going to whack me. I thought, boy, I'm glad I don't believe that. Woo! So I get to the end of the little tour, and I go to the ranger lady again, and I say, if you've got letters, would you mind if I look at a couple of them? And she said, no, come on in. So she takes me into the headquarters of Volcanic National Park, and I go into the headquarters, and there she takes me into a back room where there are file cabinets, big gray file cabinets, United States government issue from World War II, and they're just everywhere. And she said, let's do this one. And she just opens a drawer. And she said, just start there at February. You can go as far as you want. If you want copies of some of them, please feel free. So I opened. Here's a note I took. I got copies at home. They're in a folder. Dear Ranger, in 1974, I took this rock from your island. Although I do not believe in Polynesian gods or their legions, I'd never forgive myself if bad things kept happening to me and I still had this stupid rock. And I looked over at her and I said, what happens to all the rocks? And she's in a big pile out back. Dear Madam Pele, a personal letter. Since I took this black sand, my karma has been tainted. Please take it back and accept my repentance. Dear Goddess, now we're really getting personal. I didn't believe anything about taking lava rocks till I got home and found that my refrigerator had stopped and all the food was rotten. And I read this and I got this image in my head about Madame Peely, and as soon as that rock is picked up, she looks at one of her friends and says, all right, get the refrigerator. Then my son was in a very bad truck accident. Then I lost my job as president of a savings and loan company. Please take back the rock. Let my life return to normal. I'm so glad I don't believe that about God. Amen. And then I went to a children's Sabbath school class and heard a Sabbath school teacher telling the children that if you went swimming on Sabbath, God couldn't protect you. And then I heard other stories and other stories and other stories that all of you have heard in your life about the God who stands behind the door waiting for you to do something wrong, and the minute you do, he jumps out, says, gotcha, and whacks you across the side of the head, and you've got terminal tinnitus or something. Where the things that happen to us, we blame directly on God because he did it, because we did it. Every religion on earth believes that. I'm serious. I'm in Thailand, and I go to this absolutely gorgeous temple. I don't understand it all. I asked one of the monks, how does this work? And he says, you give gifts to the gods, they give gifts to you. You don't give gifts, they kill you. And I thought, wow, sure glad I don't believe that. And then I realized, if you cross God, even Christians talk about how God is going to nail you for being unfaithful, right? It makes me really uncomfortable that this happens, but it happens everywhere. And so I've got a really good friend who is the communication director for Krishna Consciousness International, the Hare Krishna people, Anuruddha Das. And he and I have spent hours in restaurants. We used to go out and eat early morning in restaurants together. And he would say, all right, give me a Bible story. And so I give him a Bible story. The story of Esther, Queen Esther. And he says, no, I got it. And he would go to the Bhagavad Gita, and he would open it, and he would give me the Esther story out of their Bible. It's the same, but there's a difference. In the Esther story in here, God wins. And so does Esther. In the Esther story in the other, you only win if you appease, and that's the word, the gods. When Martin Luther realized that the only way he could be forgiven for things he believed and had done, he was told the only way that can happen is if you go up this bunch of steps in Rome and apologize. But you have to do that on your knees or God will not accept your apology. What do we believe about God? I'd like to suggest that most Christians still believe that your salvation depends upon your behavior. It's just that simple. If you behave poorly, God whacks you. And he keeps records, by the way. One year on the Oregon Trail at Fort Bridger in Wyoming. And Fort Bridger was no big deal, by the way. It was simply a place with a blacksmith shop and an easy place for 1,000 wagons to park in the open next to a good source of water. But at Fort Bridger, a wagon train came through, and on that wagon train was a reverend, a pastor. And that pastor met Jim Bridger, the mountain man who was in charge of Fort Bridger, and they became best of friends. And at the end of winter, because the entire wagon train came through too late, they weren't going to make it to Oregon in time before the snow came. Well, the wagon train stayed. And in the spring, as the wagon train headed north, Jim Bridger went along for the first 5 days. He would ride beside, he would ride ahead, he would ride, never got up in the train, in the wagons. But every once in a while, he and Marcus Whitman would have a conversation about what was going on and how he was going to take care of Bridger's 2 children. For you see, during the time that Marcus Whitman was at Fort Bridger that winter, he told Jim Bridger about a God who loves you because he is love. About a God who forgives because forgiving is his favorite activity. About a God whose one dream is to get everybody ever born on earth to come home and live with him in heaven. About a God who would do anything to destroy the thief who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. About the God who is committed to life. The Greek word, by the way, is weird in that John 10:10. I would have expected it to be bios. For I have come that you may have life. Bios, that's biology, isn't that life? Well, that is a good Greek word for life, but it's not the word Jesus used. He used the word zoe, Z-O-E, with an accent on the E. And you know what it means? Life as God has it. And that's where in some of the versions it says life overflowing, full, free, because that's the kind of love God offers. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but God says, hey, I want to give you life, but not just life like a lion or like a platypus. No, I want to give you life like I have it. Everything I have, everything I am is yours. If you want it, come on home. And he doesn't say, be good. He says, I love you. And I'm here to give you Zoe. And somehow, Marcus Whitman convinced Jim Bridger that was what God is like. And Bridger sent his 2 children along. Later that year, when the message came back from a place called Walla Walla, Washington, that Marcus Whitman and his mission station on the river had been taken and there was a massacre, and both of Bridger's children were killed. Jim Bridger got on his horse and rode for days. And when he came back, he said, it's okay. God loved them. That's the message I want people to recognize. I have this strong commitment that at some point, God's greatest desire is very simple. He wants everyone to know who he is. In fact, a friend of mine puts it this way. God's greatest desire is for every human being to see a clear picture of his character. Because when they do, they will fall in love with God. But the devil doesn't want that to happen because he is the thief, the one who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And the enemy is in the garden, and the enemy says, I'm going to fix this. And so what he does is he builds a huge wall between us and God. And then he takes that wall and splays across it the graffiti of hate. Everything he can to say, God hates you. God is going to hit you back if you mess with him. If you don't light 4 candles, God is going to kill your grandma. And all of that stuff. It's all wrong. It's all what the devil splays on this wall. Anything to get us to believe the wrong things about God. But every once in a while, carefully and with perfect timing, God reaches up and pushes out a brick. And there's this flash of light. And we, humans, who glance up there and see this light coming, we go, oh, really? Is he like that? And in that brief glimpse of his eyes, we fall in love. in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we believe there are 28 holes in the wall. I think there's a lot more than that. And I think they're tailored to meet the needs of specific people like Jim Bridger. The Bridger I've studied and come to love was a crazy mountain man. But the whole was you can trust God when everything goes bad because he loves you. And his goal is to fill his house with you. I have a friend in Mozambique, Africa, an Adventist pastor. And I was sitting with him one day in a tiny church where the pews were made out of sticks. You take a branch off an acacia tree and you cut it so that there's a fork, and you do that on the other end, and then you put a log of acacia in the middle, and that's a pew. Works fine. And people don't fall asleep very well because they're certainly not comfortable. And so the two of us are sitting there on one of those pews talking, and I said, "So, Eliezer, how'd you learn about God?" He said, "Well, one day I was selling my tomatoes in the market. And to get to the market, of course, how do you get to the market? I ride my cow." So he rides his cow for 7 kilometers, and then he gets to a place where he gets in a little minibus, and the minibuses, these are the ones designed to hold 9 people. And there's usually at least 15 or 20 inside or around on this minibus. He said, again, sometimes I lie down inside on top of everyone's head, and sometimes I'm on top, and I always have my tomatoes and everything close. And I went into the market, and I was selling, and almost everything was gone, and a man came up to me, and he said, "Do you know Jesus?" And he said, I scratched my head and said, "No, I don't. Does he live nearby?" And the man knelt down and said, No. Jesus is God. He is the one who, when you take your cows and you put them together and your cows are inside, how many cows do you have, sir? 2? Okay, when you put your 2 cows inside and there's a gate, Jesus is the gate to the safety of the cow corral. My friend said, "I don't know him. Does he make gates?" No. This is going to be hard, isn't it? You see, I'm a guy who goes around and I sell books about this Jesus and about his Father who made everything around us, including the cows and the tomatoes. And at this point, my friend is really interested. And they talk a while, and the call porter, for that's who he was, said, I'd be glad to sell you a book or even give you a book, but all my books are gone. All I have is my own Bible, and I've got to use it because I'm doing a presentation here in a few days. But I'll give you one page. And he opened his Bible, and he tore out a page and handed it to my friend. That will teach you about Jesus. And then he prayed and disappeared. A call porter who gave away one page out of a Bible. And I said, what page was it? We all want to know, right? That was the first thing I asked him. He said, "I'll show you." And so he goes, shows me his Bible, and he pulls this one page out of the Bible. It's all folded over and carefully guarded, and I open it, and I understand why my buddy is a Seventh-day Adventist pastor today. What page do you think it was? Now, you're all going to say John 10:10, right? John chapter 14. Sorry. And if I go, what did I do today? Turn me off. Throw me a mic. Huh? Okay, I'm on green. I never used the red one. That was something I learned. Green. And it is on. John chapter 14. And you know what it says. And if I go, I will prepare a place for you, that you may live. He learned about Jesus. It had John 14 on one side, and it had John 15 on the other. He learned about Jesus, about heaven, about the Father, about somebody giving everything he possibly could so that you could live with him in his home. And he says, look, Now, he had a Portuguese Bible, not an English Bible. In the Portuguese Bible, John 14:4 reads fascinatingly. It says, "For I am going to build you a room in my Father's house." And my friend said, "I want you to take a look at my house." And I go to his house. He said, "My grandparents lived here, and the parents of my grandparents. And I have lived here all my life. It's a rondavel. It's a round room. It is exactly 16 feet across." He says, "This is all I've ever lived in. My family was raised here. I was raised here. My own children are being raised here. When I go to where Jesus lives, he's promised me a room of my own. I've never had a room of my own. I think it has my name on it." He's that. That's what God has promised. And when I started reading and studying, all I wanted to do was go home and be with him. And every once in a while, God reaches up and pushes out a brick. And for each of us, it's personalized because he loves us individually. And he wants to give us life, but not just normal life. Life as he has it. Do you ever feel like he's far away? "For I am the gate, I am the shepherd." Now, I was telling this about John 10:10 to a group, well, the entire village in Savunga, Alaska one time. Savunga, Alaska is on St. Lawrence Island, and it's basically a place where snow lives and nothing more. I mean, it's really hard to be a vegetarian there. The only things you can have are whales, walruses, seals, and an occasional bird. So vegetarianism is a bit of a challenge. I asked them if they have good salads. And they said, "Oh, what?" So I'm busy talking about sheep and shepherds and the wonderful Presbyterian lady. There are 200 people live in the village. There were 200 people in the meeting. And the Presbyterian lady who was translating for me into Yupik just stopped and said something to all the people. I think she said, "Stupid man down south. He come here crazy. I fix." And she looked at me and she said, "All this nice thing you're saying about sheep, we don't never seen a sheep." "What are you talking about?" So I explained a little, and she says, "Oh, what's your?" And she said, "I have an idea. If you talk about the baby ringed seal of God, the way the way seals take care of their young, everyone will understand." And I said, "Okay, help me." And so I said, "Jesus is the Lamb of God. God loves Jesus and you as much as a mother ringed seal loves her baby." And all the people went, "Ooh!" And they just cheered. It was as if all of a sudden it all made sense. And God reaches up and pushes out a brick. For a mother ringed seal will do anything to protect her baby and train it to enjoy life as much as she does. Zoe. So what's God like? God says, "The thief is here to steal your hope, to kill your joy, and to destroy everything I want to give you. But I'm here to give you everything God is for you to enjoy." One of my favorite books, a book by C.S. Lewis called The Last Battle. They're a group of children who have just arrived in God's country. And they're not sure about heaven. It doesn't make much sense to them. They're kind of confused. And then all of a sudden, one of those who is walking with them says, "God's country is like an onion. Except every time you peel off a layer, it's bigger than it was before." It's the best description I've ever heard about knowledge, about knowing God.
Every time I learn something new about him, I discover he's bigger than I ever dreamed he was. There's so much I want to talk about. There's so much more I want to work with you on. I want to ask questions and give you a chance to ask me and tell me and whatever. And starting tomorrow night, we're going to do that. Just in a group, we're going to talk about what do you see when the holes in the wall are filled with the character of God. And instead of seeing hatred, instead of seeing people who are good to people who look and behave like them, but not to anybody else. Instead of seeing people who love people who speak their language, but nobody who speaks the other language. I want to help you see a God who will do anything to pull you into heaven. A God whose one great, happiest activity is forgiving sinners. And one day, I was taking pictures at a nursing home in Colorado. I get weird assignments. And my assignment was to take pictures of everyone in this assisted living center and everybody in the nursing home beside it. And so I'm in and I'm going room to room, and I'm finally down to where the kitchen is. And in the kitchen cafeteria area, there are about 5 ladies and 1 old guy. And they're taking the peas that they have picked from their own garden and they're canning them. And the oldest of the ladies is sitting out at a big table. And I must say, she's not the prettiest of the ladies. She has had a hard, long life. That's very, very obvious and very frustrating. But I come over to her and she smiles and says, "Hello, what's your name?" And I start taking pictures as soon as she gives me permission. And I take a bunch of pictures and she says, "I hate pictures because I look like an old witch." And I said, "No, you don't. When you smile, you look like one of God's children." And she started to cry. And I said, "What's the best memory you have in your life, Ethel?" And here's the story she told me. Never forget it. It's one of the best stories I know about Jesus and his Father and the Spirit. She said, "When we came here, my mother died when I was born. I have 7 brothers and a father. We lived in a dugout in Colorado. If you know anything about the eastern slope, they live on the eastern slope out near North Glen. Flat, desert, nasty. You find a little bit of a hill, you dig a hole in it, you put some grass on the top, you make it as cozy as you possibly can. That's home. That's in a dugout. They have some land that they've turned into potatoes. With help of a lot of other people, they have an irrigation ditch that comes through and helps make potatoes to grow. And she said, "I grew up playing in the irrigation canals and doing fun things. And then when I was 6 years old, my father called me with the boys and said, 'You're now 6 years old. We want to give you a gift. From now on, you are the woman of the house. We want you to do the cleaning, the washing, the cooking, and take care of the garden. We're going to be busy in the fields.' And from the day I was 6, that was my job. And I would wash everything. Doesn't matter whether it was the middle of winter or the middle of the summer. My job was to take the washing out and to put it in the irrigation ditch and wash it, and then to cook the food, and all the goods. I loved what I did, and I loved my brothers, and I loved my dad. But they were busy, hard-working people. And one day, I was out washing hard. It was cold. The irrigation ditch wasn't moving very fast, but it was moving. And as I was working away, I suddenly looked up, and there went my father's brand new pair of long johns. You know, the one with the flap in the back? Oh, they were walking down on their own down the ditch. And I got up and I started running, and I slipped and fell, and I watched as they went over the gate and on, and I ran as fast. I lost them. My dad had paid $1 whole for those just the week before, and they were his favorite pair of long johns. They kept him warm, and I lost them. And this lady who is 87 is weeping at the table, remembering the best experience of her life. And I'm thinking, I'm so sorry I asked. And she said, I stayed there all day. I was afraid to come home. I knew what Papa would do. He would take me and he would pull down the leather strap. And he would use the leather strap to remind me always to be good. Finally, it got dark and I went home. And when I got to the house, I opened the door very slowly and carefully and slipped in, hoping nobody would see me. And my father and my brothers were all waiting. "Where have you been?" I just started crying. I didn't know anything else to do. And I said, "I lost your long johns." And I cried. And my father didn't even think about the strap. He simply came running to me, threw his arms around me and said, "Honey, you're the most important person in our family. I couldn't do anything except my long johns are nothing. We thought we'd lost you. We can always get long johns, but we love you." And now I had all my brothers and my papa, and somebody had made food, and we had a banquet of forgiveness for lost long johns and forever love. That's the Jesus I know. It's the God I know, the Holy Spirit I know. A Godhead determined in any way possible to destroy the devil's attempts to make him look stupid, ugly, and to make sure that you and I have the privilege of Zoe, life as God has it. Father, thank you for Jesus and for the people who recorded everything he said. And Lord, thank you for what he said, for the way he said it. And even when we didn't understand, that he was willing to explain and say all that stuff about the sheep and the gate and the door and all. It's just our way of saying, we love you and we want you home with us. Lord, may that be soon. And every day when we're tempted to distrust or be afraid, remind us who you really are. And help us fall in love again. Amen.